I didn't start recording before. And I also got to put on Facebook. These are all things that people would say when they were going to war. These were all things that people would they would all say when they were in a dire situation. So this is, again, all part of their setup for what happens when we go to war. Mike? Thanks. So, thank you. So, I don't know. Keep going.
For thus my Lord said to me, go, set up a sentry. Let him announce what he sees. He will see mounted men, horsemen in pairs, riders on asses, riders on camels. And he will listen closely, most attentively. And like a lion, he called out, on my Lord's lookout I stand, ever by day, and at my post I watch every night. And there they come, mounted men, horsemen in pairs. Then he spoke up and said, fallen, fallen is Babylon, and all the images of her gods have crashed to the ground. My threshing, the product of my threshing floor, what I have heard from the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, that have I told to you.
Yeah, and again, this pronouncement against Babylonian about the Persians seems a little late, because we're still within the Assyrians, then we have the Babylonians, and then we have the Persians. So this seems to be like jumping ahead time-wise. And again, it could be again that the editors looked at this pronouncement, they saw that it was against Babylonia, and it kind of was put together with these other pronouncements. But this is almost, again, a period of time beyond when Isaiah was living, about 200 years later, which is, again, you have the Assyrians, they get destroyed by the Babylonians, and then the Babylonians get destroyed by the Persians. So if you look at it on a map, you have Assyria, then further to the east you have Babylonia, and even further to the east of that you have Persia. So each empire kind of built on the previous one, and that all happened from about the 750, 800, say 800 BCE to the rise of the Persian Empire, which is about 500. So that all happened over a period of 300 years. That you had the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and then the Persians. And the Persians were able to maintain a pretty strong empire for about 400, 500 years. The Romans ended up going into the Persian Empire and pretty much making them a vassal. The Persian Empire at one point, went all the way into Greece during the time of Alexander the Great. He was able to destroy and subjugate the Persians, but I mean, the Persians didn't go away. They just, for a while, were under Alexander the Great's power. He destroyed the Persian capitals and stuff like that. But the Persians came back and rebuilt after Alexander the Great, and just pretty much, again, were never as great as they were up until Alexander the Great's time, but they were an empire for a few hundred years, and actually brought a lot of stability to the Middle East. Egypt, Israel, all of Syria, all of Iraq, all those areas were all under Persian control, Turkey, and they were all pretty stable. I mean, that's one of the most stable periods in the ancient Israel period was the Persian period, which ran for the Jews, it ran from about 500 BCE to about Alexander the Great's time till about 300, and up until that time when the Persians controlled all that area, including Israel, pretty calm. How do we know? Because we don't know anything about it. There were no wars, there were no battles, there were no insurrections, there was just calm time for about 200 years. We don't know anything about it. What? Nothing to write home about, nothing to write in the Bible, it's just not there. I mean, technically speaking, it's still a biblical period because, it's in that time that probably maybe, book of Ecclesiastes was written during that time. Maybe some other books were written during that time. Maybe the book of Esther was written during that time. But we just don't know a lot about that period. There's just not events that we know about that were going on. It was Persia controlled Israel, And again, that whole area, and it was pretty calm. I mean, most likely they were Jews that were fighting with the Persians when they went into Greece. I mean, we don't know how many. There's no records of how many Jewish soldiers fought with the Persian Empire as they made their way across into Greece. But I mean, we don't know for sure, but during the Battle of Thermopylae and during the battles at Marathon and all those other battles you read about between the Greeks and the Persians, we would have been on the Persian side. We were not on the Greek side, that's for sure. There just wasn't very many Jews that would have even made their way into the Aegean during that period. And we were pretty happy subjects of the Persian Empire. So we don't know they were there. I'm not saying the movie The 300 is going to show that, but
Because the Persians let them be.
yeah,
Jewish?
they let them be. They let them be Jewish. They left them alone. Let us build the second temple, live in the second temple, Jerusalem, and just let us alone. So there's every reason to believe that there were Jewish soldiers that would have fought with the Persians because they liked Persia and they liked the king and they liked Cyrus, they liked Darius, they liked these guys. So this is something to keep in mind when we read Isaiah, because by the end of Isaiah, we're going to have Isaiah praising the Persian kings. I mean, we have it in the Bible and other places too, but Isaiah is going to praise the king of Persia in the end. So we feel differently about them than we did the Babylonians and the Assyrians, because quite frankly, the Babylonians and the Assyrians killed and exiled Jewish people. The Persians probably would have if the Babylonians and the Assyrians hadn't done it already, right? The Persians would have, because they conquered those areas, but by the time they conquered them, they were already part of Babylonia or Assyria. So it wasn't like the Persians took away our independence. The Assyrians did, the Babylonians did. The Persians were the inheritors of that, but they weren't the ones who did it. They actually let us have power back. They let us go build the temple. They let us go back to our land. And so the Persians are our heroes, which of course is ironic, because they're our biggest enemy today. But they weren't. So, and by the way, when you asked the question at the beginning, Doreen, why do we have Esther? I've told people this before, and I have no issue telling it now. The story of Esther and the holiday of Purim is a way for Jews to celebrate Persian New Year. And just so you know, we celebrated it under the guise of Purim, and nobody had an issue with it. This was a way for us to celebrate Nowruz, which on the Persian calendar is about 2 weeks from now, 10 days, 11 days. So it's March 19th. So if you want to wish your Persian friends a happy New Year, in the next days, you can start doing that, because at spring, at the vernal equinox, is the Persian New Year. This was a way for Jews to celebrate Persian New Year for the hundreds and hundreds of years that we were under Persian control, and then for the 2,000 years that Jews lived under Persian emperors up until today. Though ironically, Nowruz is not really celebrated with much enthusiasm in Iran today, because it's a pre-Islamic holiday. It was a day when people got really, really drunk, and the Persians knew how to party. And we would party with them. It was a way for us to celebrate Persian New Year. All right, so let's read this part, which again, when you see the place called Duma, it's a place that is mentioned in Genesis, but again, it's part of the area of the dome in the desert between Jordan, where Jordan and Israel are today. Okay.
The Duma pronouncement. A call comes to me from Seir. Watchman, what of the night? Watchman, what of the night? The watchman replied, morning came, and so did night. If you would inquire, inquire. Come back again. The in the step pronouncement. In the scrub, In the steppe you will lodge, O caravans of the Dedanites. Meet the thirsty with water, you who dwell in the land of Tema. Greet the fugitive with bread, for they have fled before swords, before the whetted sword, before the bow that was drawn, before the stress of war. For thus my Lord has said to me, in another year, fixed like the years of a hired laborer, all the multitude of Kedar shall vanish. The remaining bows of Kedar's warriors shall be few in number, for the Lord, the God of Israel, has spoken.
Yeah, and both of these sections are about areas in Jordan and in the desert, areas where there are kind of the equivalent of Arab Bedouin peoples that live. That would occasionally be a problem for us. They'd occasionally, come on in and raid our areas. For those of us who went to Petra, the Nabateans are the descendants of those peoples who eventually, under the Roman era, became kind of sedentary and not as Bedouin-like as their ancestors had been. They started building cities and they started living a little bit more like people that lived in cities rather than just Bedouin nomads and caravan people. So occasionally there'd be groups that would inhabit that area that would either decide to stop raiding and decide to stop kind of living as nomads, and the Kedarites, the Temanites, some of the people that we just mentioned, and again, it continues all the way to the Nabateans, to the Arabs, and even to this day, we've talked about it before. The British kind of chose one of these groups to be the kings of Jordan and Iraq, and the Hashemite kingdoms were basically Bedouins that the British decided would be kings, and they had no history of being kings or living in cities or being administrators. And the British were, most people think the British did that on purpose so that they could have people that they could control. But yeah, so the Arabs have always had this kind of issue between living as city folk and also kind of giving up their tradition of living as intense. So let's continue.
The Valley of Vision
You
pronouncement.
can see it's uncertain. What does this actually mean? But you'll see what's going on here.
What can have happened to you that you have gone, all of you, up on the roofs? O you who were full of tumult, you clamorous town, you city so gay. Your slain are not the slain of the sword, nor the dead of battle. Your officers have all departed. They fled far away. Your survivors were all taken captive without their bows. That is why I say, let me be. I will weep bitterly. Press not to comfort me for the ruin of my poor people. For my Lord of God of hosts had a day of tumult and din and confusion. Here raged in the valley of vision, and Shoah on the hill. While Elam bore the quiver in troops of mounted men, and Kir bared the shield, and your choicest lowlands were filled with chariots and horsemen. They stormed at Judah's gateway and pressed beyond its screen. You gave thought on that day to the arms in the forest house, and you took note of the many breaches in the city of David, and you collected the water of the lower pool, and you counted the houses of Jerusalem and pulled houses down to fortify the wall, and you constructed a basin between the two walls for the water of the old pool. But you gave no thought to him who planned it. You took no note of him who designed it long before. My Lord God of hosts summoned on that day to weeping and lamenting, to tonsuring and girding with sackcloth. Instead, there was rejoicing and merriment, killing of cattle and slaughtering of sheep, eating of meat and drinking of wine. Eat and drink, for tomorrow we die.
You know that line, right?
Yeah.
That's the line. That's where it comes from. Eat and drink, for tomorrow we die.
Then the Lord of hosts revealed himself to my ears. This iniquity shall never be forgiven you until you die, said my Lord God of hosts. Thus said my Lord God of hosts, go in to see that steward, that Shevna, in charge of the palace. What have you here, and whom have you here, that you have hewn out a tomb for yourself here? O you who have hewn your tomb on high, O you who have hollowed out for yourself an abode in the cliff. The Lord is about to shake you severely, fellow, and then wrap you around himself. Indeed, he will wind you about him as a headdress, a turban, off to a broad land. There you shall die, and there shall be the chariots bearing your body, O shame of your master's house. For I will hurl you from your station, and you shall be torn down from your stand. And in that day I will summon my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and I will invest him with your tunic, gird him with your sash, and deliver your authority into his hand. And he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and the men of Judah.
So what we're talking about here are the Assyrians who went to war against us, who destroyed parts of Jerusalem, who were, part of these destroyers of our capital, and Isaiah is saying here, you will get punished for this. You will be destroyed, and they were. Judah survived the Assyrian onslaught. They survived it, and the Assyrians were destroyed by the Babylonians. So everything that Isaiah says does come to pass. It happened.
I will place the keys of David's palace on his shoulders, and what he unlocks, none may shut, and what he locks, none may open. He shall be a seat of honor to his father's household. I will fix him as a peg in a firm place, on which all the substance of his father's household shall be hung, the sprouts and the lees, all the small vessels, from bowls to all sorts of jars.
And again, this guy, Eliakim, becomes Jehoiakim, who's one of the last kings of Judah. We read about him in the book of Kings. This is a guy who ends up surviving and becoming, a king of a leader of Judah.
In that day, declares the Lord of hosts, the peg fixed in a firm place shall give way. It shall be cut down and shall fall, and the weight it supports shall be destroyed. For it is the Lord who has spoken.
Yeah. And so this prophecy ends up again happening during the time of King Josiah. And there's hope. There's hope for the people surviving the Assyrian onslaught, and in the chaos, they'll come out of it. And again, the way Isaiah says it, God won't forget. God won't forget these people that were responsible for this. The Assyrians will pay the price. So here's a pronouncement against our friends, the Phoenicians. Hey, Phoenicians, what have you been doing up in Lebanon?
The Tyr pronouncement. Howl, you ships of Tarshish, for havoc has been wrought. Not a house is left. As they came from the land of Kittim, this was revealed to them. Moan, you coast land dwellers, you traders of Sidon, once thronged by seafarers. Over many waters your revenue came, from the trade of nations, from the grain of Shihor, the harvest of the Nile.
Yeah, now look at that. This gives you an idea, even in his pronouncements, how big the Phoenician trade routes were. They went from Egypt all the way to Tarshish, which, we're not exactly sure. You'll see the note says see the notes of Tarshish. We know from Tarshish the story of Jonah. Some people say it's in modern day Spain. There are other people who say that it's in modern day Turkey. Either way, it's very far away from Israel and very far away from the Nile, which is one of the extents of the Phoenician trade, from Egypt all the way up to maybe Turkey and maybe all the way over to Spain. The lands of Kittim, which are the Aegean Islands, right? Crete and Cyprus and those kinds of areas are all part of the Phoenician areas. So Tyre and Sidon were the two main cities of the Phoenicians. So they're used kind of interchangeably, Tyre and Sidon. And again, they are in modern day Lebanon, not areas that are easy to, over the last 40 years, to excavate or to be able to even visit, because there's been a civil war going on in Lebanon since the 70s. But these areas were very important during the biblical period as major trade hubs, maritime trade hubs, all the way up through the time of Alexander the Great, who laid siege to the cities of Tyre and Sidon. Yep. So it's amazing how powerful these tiny kingdoms, these tiny cities were, this kingdom of the Phoenicians. Look, our language is based on the Phoenician language. The Phoenicians are the ones who bring together Hebrew and Greek, and to some extent, obviously, English. The alphabet that the Phoenicians had is our alphabet. It's our Aleph Bet. It was our Aleph Bet first, and now it's also the alphabet of the Greeks and the Romans. That was the Phoenicians responsible for that. So they're responsible for the city of Carthage, which ended up becoming so important that they eventually went to war against the Romans and almost defeated Rome. Came pretty close. Interesting to think what would have happened to Rome and to the history of the world if Hannibal and the Carthaginians had actually won the Punic Wars. Hannibal spoke Phoenician. He spoke a language very similar to Hebrew. Think about that. The language that Hannibal spoke would have been understood by someone who read this. We could have all been speaking Phoenician or Hebrew instead of English. Could that have happened? Maybe. In an alternate universe, we would be speaking Phoenician.
Well, I don't know. English isn't a Romance language, so.
I know, but if the alphabet or if the
But we might be writing it in Hebrew letters.
yeah, it's not a Romance language, but if Phoenician had become the dialect, it's unbelievable. How would it? I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to think about, because I mean, the people that he destroyed, I mean, the Hannibal's armies were pretty formidable. He famously tried to take elephants across the Alps, and that's why some people felt he was overambitious. But anyways, it's interesting to think about. These were his ancestors, the Phoenicians. All right, what are the?
Were you scrolling past where we were?
Sorry. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Be ashamed, O Sidon, for the sea, this stronghold of the sea, declares, I am as one who has never labored, never given birth, never raised youths or reared maidens. When the Egyptians heard it, they quailed as when they heard about Tyre. Pass on to Tarshish, howl, you coastland dwellers. Was such your merry city in former times of yore? Did her feet carry her off to sojourn far away? Who was it that planned this for crown-wearing Tyre, whose merchants were nobles, whose traders the world honored. The Lord of hosts planned it to defile all glorious beauty, to shame all the honored of the world. Traverse your land like the Nile, fair Tarshish. This is a harbor no more. The Lord poised his arm o'er the sea and made kingdoms quake. It was he decreed destruction for Phoenicia's strongholds and said, you shall be gay no more, O plundered one, fair maiden Sidon. Oh, up, cross over to Kittim. Even there you shall have no rest.
Yeah. So again, the Phoenicians also bore the brunt of Assyrian and then Babylonian conquests. The Phoenicians lost power to them. They weren't destroyed completely, but they were made part of a Babylonian empire. And the Babylonians then got to take over the routes, the coastal routes of the Phoenicians. There was always, like, I guess you could say, the Jews, a group of people in Phoenicia that kept that alive. There were Lebanese who felt that they were inheritors of this cosmopolitan maritime culture up through the 70s. Seriously. I mean, if you talk to people in Lebanon, they were proud of their Phoenician heritage. Not so anymore, because the country is essentially being ruled by Hezbollah now, but there were people who were proud of their Phoenician heritage, which again was in some ways very close to the language that they spoke, the culture that they spoke was very close to ancient Israel. Look, it must have been close enough. It must have been, well, we read about how King Solomon used the Phoenicians for building the temple, King Hiram, who helped build, the temple with him. But look at this. Look at fair maiden Sidon. Bat Sidon. Sounds a lot like Bat Sion, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But the Petulat, the maiden, the virgin, Bat Sidon. I mean, that's pretty much what we call ourselves. That's what Isaiah calls. That's what he calls his own people. So there probably was a lot of connection and occasionally very good relationships between the people of Sidon, of Sidon and Israel. Bat Sidon. It's pretty powerful. All right.
Behold the land of Chaldea. This is the people that has ceased to be. Assyria, which founded it for ships, which raised its watchtowers, erected its ramparts, has turned it into a ruin. Howl, O ships of Tarshish, for your stronghold is destroyed. In that day, Tyre shall remain forgotten for 70 years, equaling the lifetime of one king. After a lapse of 70 years, it shall go with Tyre as with the harlot in the ditty. Take a lyre, go about the town, harlot long forgotten. Sweetly play, make much music to bring you back to mind.
Oh, and again, this seems to be a song. Like people knew this song, and now Isaiah is saying that this is a song that you can sing about Tyre, the city. So the song becomes a play on, again, we don't know the song. He knew the song. Everybody knew the song. That this song was a song that could now be made fun of, or not fun of, but to lament what happened to Sidon. And by the way, 70 years is exactly how long that the Babylonian exile was what lasted, right? The Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, and then after 70 years, we got to come home. So it's very similar. The people of Tyre and Sidon are essentially given the same kind of punishment that we are.
For after a lapse of 70 years, the Lord will take note of Tyre, and she shall resume her fee-taking and play the harlot with all the kingdoms of the world on the face of the earth. But her prophets and hire shall be consecrated to the Lord. They shall not be treasured or stored. Rather shall her prophets go to those who abide before the Lord. that they may eat their fill and clothe themselves elegantly.
Which is
That's
interesting
weird.
because, yeah, what were you gonna say, Rosemary?
What?
What were you saying?
It's just weird that he's comparing people to a prostitute in a good way.
Yeah, well, it's also because essentially it's an interesting turn of phrase, because essentially what he's saying is that Tyre, Tyre is never going to not be Tyre. Tyre is always going to be that kind of city. And by that kind of city, it's a city where people go to have fun. I mean, it's not a coincidence that this is what he says about Tyre, because
This is sort of Vegas.
yeah, but it's like every port city,
Mhm.
throughout history,
Right.
which is there's people that go there and they let loose, they have fun. That's where the sailors go to have a good time.
I
So Tyre was that kind of city. So it's not going to stop being that kind of city, but it's going to essentially be used. Their funds are going to be used for good things then. Look, it was an important, Tyre was the important commercial metropolis for the region. So stuff. Now you could say, well, there's Haifa had a port, and in the ancient world, Haifa was not as important as it was now in the last 150 years. But Jaffa was a port, but also not like Tyre. So Tyre had already had this commercial hub. Look, Lebanon was a fun city, according to people up and through the 70s. People loved going, they called it the Paris of the Middle East. People had a good time there. But they're saying, again, it's not going to stop being that city, but it's going to go, some of it's going to go, or it doesn't say some of it, it says it will go towards good things. Well, in a way that happened. Why? Because up through the time of this, through the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans, what was the money that was brought to Jerusalem? So every Jew was supposed to bring a shekel, right? It was a Tyrian shekel. The shekel coin that people used when they came to Jerusalem was a shekel, silver shekel, that was the shekel of Tyre. It was Tyrian money. So they didn't bring Jewish money, and there were coins in Judah, not many, but they were usually Persian coins used. But the Tyrian coin in particular was the coin that was used as the temple tax. So it did happen. And so as much as Tyre is going to, continue to be like it is, it'll be used for good purposes. So that is the Phoenicians. Kind of bad, but also kind of good. The Phoenicians kind of don't come out like some of the other countries in the sense that it's not all bad. So now, what we're going to finish with today is called the Isaiah Apocalypse, chapters 24 through 27. Why is it called Isaiah's Apocalypse? Well, because it's like apocalypses that are in Christian sources. Now we know Dead Sea Scroll sources, which we uncovered in the last 70 years. Other sources from the pseudepigrapha that were kept by the church. We know that these apocalypses are not that uncommon. There's an apocalypse or a kind of a future battle that's foretold in the book of Daniel, even in the Bible. But this is an early version of it. But it's impossible for people to read this without thinking about the later versions of it, especially the apocalypse that Christians have in the book of Revelations. So every time you read anything about this, well, even in Jewish sources, we can't help ourselves but think about those later sources. Isaiah is the earliest version of this. So what we're reading now is, if you will, the early form of an apocalypse. And you can argue that even in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, there's visions or there's curses, there's visions of what could happen that are really bad. But Isaiah is the earliest version of this that we have. but it's impossible for people to read this today without thinking about the later versions. So even calling it an apocalypse is basically a factor, a function of what people wrote later. So keep that in mind. But I'm just telling you that as we read it, that it's going to shift a little bit. The tone and the style changes here. It's still considered first Isaiah. Nobody says that this is necessarily written by the second Isaiah writer, but it is definitely a different tone. It's a different section, if you will. So the last pronouncements we had about these other countries, we began with before that with Isaiah's prophecies about kind of the future and about times of peace, but also again writing during a time of war. This is some versions of what war could look like, and this is what it is. As I said, I've already told you it's called the Isaiah Apocalypse, but let's read it.
Behold, the Lord will strip the earth bare and lay it waste and twist its surface and scatter its inhabitants. Layman and priest shall fare alike, slave and master, handmaid and mistress, buyer and seller, lender and borrower, creditor and debtor. The earth shall be bare, bare. It shall be plundered, plundered, for it is the Lord who spoke this word. The earth is withered, sere. The world languishes. It is sere. The most exalted people of the earth languish. For the earth was defiled under its inhabitants, because they transgressed teachings, violated laws, broke the ancient covenant.
Yeah, and the note here would be an interesting one, because here it says they violated the teachings and they broke the ancient covenant of Brit Olam. Olam, it means eternal or everlasting covenant. It is important to understand, or to at least consider, what covenant are we talking about here? Are we talking about the covenant at Mount Sinai? Are we talking about a covenant that goes back further to Noah? What is this covenant? And if the covenant is just for the Jews, then why does it seem that it's talking about everybody? It says the world languishes, the earth is withered. So it seems as though it's a bigger issue. It's not just the Jews. But keep that in mind, is that there is this sense that it does say Torah, it does say laws, it does say chok, so let's take a look as we read it. But again, this is important to some extent because, well, if this is something that already happened, then it's not really as relevant because it already happened, and Isaiah's talking about something that happened during his lifetime and then just after it, maybe. But if it still happened, it hasn't happened. If it's not something that's already happened, then it's still going to happen, in which case this is a prophecy that people still see that could happen, which means that, is this talking about the same stuff that's in the Christian Bible? Is this the same stuff that's in the book of Revelations? Which is why people talk about the Isaiah apocalypse as being either a foreshadowing of what happens in the Christian Bible, a pre-statement of it, a affirmation of it, or is it something that actually already happened? So this is, and for Ronnie, there's a Homentashen in the other room. There's also,
Just got to the Chabad.
okay, well, I'm not telling you, you can't have more Homentashen. Don't come in here bragging about your Homentashen. There's also, what's it called? There's drinks in here too. There's also Bloody Marys in there if you want. So anyways, so there is a question. Which is this covenant that we're breaking? Is it a worldwide covenant, or is it just for the Jews? So I don't know. You make your decision. Okay.
That is why a curse consumes the earth, and its inhabitants pay the penalty. That is why earth's dwellers have dwindled, and but few men are left. The new wine fails, the vine languishes, and all the merry-hearted sigh. Stilled is the merriment of timbrels, ended the clamor of revelers, stilled the merriment of lyres. They drink their wine without song. Liquor tastes bitter to the drinker. Towns are broken, empty. Every house is shut. None enters. Even over wine, a cry grows up in the streets. The sun has set on all joy. The gladness of the earth is banished.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's all encompassing. It doesn't seem like it's just for Jews. But so again, there's two things to keep in mind. Is this for everyone or just the Jews? Is this for a certain specific time that already happened, or is it still going to happen? Those things are at play for people as they read this. And as I said, for Christians, it becomes very important, because if Isaiah is talking about something that's still yet to happen, then it's consistent with Revelations and other places. So again, thinking of wine and liquor, if you don't get any joy out of it, it's not good. Not good.
Desolation is left in the town, and the gate is battered to ruins. For thus it shall be among the peoples in the midst of the earth, as when the olive tree is beaten out, like gleanings when the vintage is over. These shall lift up their voices, exult in the majesty of the Lord. They shall shout from the sea. Therefore, honor the Lord with lights in the coastlands of the sea, the name of the Lord, the God of Israel.
Yep.
From the end of the earth we hear singing, glory to the righteous. And I said, I waste away, woe is me. The faithless have acted faithlessly. The faithless have broken faith. Terror and pit and trap upon you who dwell on earth. He who flees at the report of the terror shall fall into the pit, and he who climbs out of the pit shall be caught in the trap. For sluices are opened on high. Scroll, please. And earth's foundations tremble. The earth is breaking. The earth is crumbling. The earth is tottering. The earth is swaying like a drunkard. It is rocking to and fro like a hut. Its iniquity shall weigh it down, and it shall fall to rise no more.
That certainly sounds like the whole earth.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it's everybody dealing with that.
In that day, the Lord will punish the host of heaven in heaven and the kings of the earth on earth. They shall be gathered in a dungeon as captives are gathered, and shall be locked up in a prison. But after many days, they shall be remembered.
Yeah, and that seems to indicate that angels are also getting punished. That's what it says. Host in heaven and kings on earth. Again, for later Christian writers, these kind of images were important, that there's a punishment that goes on in heaven and on earth, that captives are locked up in a dungeon, and I guess at some point they're remembered, they're taken care of, but yeah, the whole world, it seems, is and to some extent even beyond the world.
Then the moon shall be ashamed, and the sun shall be abashed. For the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and the presence will be revealed to his elders.
Yeah, and this ends on a happier note, which is that it's going to wind up being okay for us, and that Jerusalem will once again be the site of where God is, and everything will end up being okay. But it seems as though it's a problem for everyone. I mean, again, then it gets to, did it happen already, or is it still going to happen? Is this a prophecy that still has to be made to happen? Those are the issues at hand. Is it for everyone? And again, did it already happen, or is it still going to happen? So that's part of the apocalypse. It continues though.
O Lord, you are my God. I will extol you. I will praise your name. For you planned graciousness of old, counsels of steadfast faithfulness. For you have turned a city into a stone heap, a walled town into a ruin, the citadel of strangers into rubble, never to be rebuilt. Therefore, a fierce people must honor you. A city of cruel nations must fear you. For you have been a refuge for the poor man, a shelter for the needy man in his distress, shelter from rainstorm, shade from heat, when the fury of tyrants was like a winter rainstorm.
It's a beautiful imagery of what's happening. What happens for those who are, who are afraid.
The rage of strangers like heat in the desert. You subdued the heat with the shade of clouds. The singing of the tyrants was vanquished.
And here you go.
The Lord of hosts will make on this mount for all the peoples a banquet of rich viands, a banquet of choice wines, of rich viands seasoned with marrow, of choice wines well refined. And he will destroy on this mount the shroud that is drawn over the faces of all the peoples, and the covering that is spread over all the nations. He will destroy death forever. My Lord God will wipe the tears away from all faces and will put an end to the reproach of his people over all the earth, for it is the Lord who has spoken.
Yeah. This is why when people read this, they say, well, wait a second. Doesn't this sound a lot like what's in the Christian Bible? Yeah, the reality is that it does say so. It says it in Isaiah already, that God is going to do all these things that help people feel safe again. Here it says he's going to destroy death. Is that the personification of death? Is that the God of death? Is that the angel of death? I don't know, but
What's the footnote?
Your business.
there it is. Not all death, just the death that was visited on us by the Assyrians. Again, these are all possibilities. But again, this idea that God wipes away the tears from the faces of the people is a beautiful image of God ending suffering and having hope that there will be good times ahead. So, did it happen? Is it still going to happen? Did it happen, but it'll happen again? These are all questions that people have had for a very long time.
In that day they shall say, this is our God. We trusted in him and he delivered us. This is the Lord in whom we trusted. Let us rejoice and exult in his deliverance. For the hand of the Lord shall descend upon this mount, and Moab shall be trampled under him. Scroll, please.
Yep.
I think that's too far. For the hand of the Lord shall descend upon this mount, and Moab shall be trampled under him as straw is threshed to bits at Madmenah. Then he will spread out his hands in their homeland, as a swimmer spreads his hands out to swim, and he will humble their pride along with the emblems of their power.
Yeah, so this prophecy also includes the fact that the Moabites aided the Assyrians in these battles and took advantage of our weakness. And so they're going to get theirs. The Moabites will get theirs. And again, what does it say right here? There it says Assyria, but 1 second. The let me just see where it, yeah. Is that a play on this name of this town, Madmena, or a play on that? But and see this note here too. No, that one's not that important. Oh yeah, sorry, one more paragraph or one more line.
And he will humble their pride along with the emblems of their power. Yea, the secure fortification of their walls he will lay low and humble, will raise to the ground, to the very dust.
Yeah, so again, it seems as though that already happened. If this is talking about the Assyrians and the Moabites and people that we're going to have get vengeance on, it seems to have happened. It seems to have already happened. Again, it doesn't say when it happened, or it's a prophecy.
So Isaiah is in between the
Assyrians and the Babylonians.
Yeah.
So the Babylonians did his bidding, though again, the problem is the second Isaiah talks about the destruction of the Babylonians, which is why we believe it's from a later period. Because it seems to be talking about what the Persians did to the Babylonians. So it's jumped ahead 150 years. So this is again still part of this section of Isaiah.
In that day, this song shall be sung in the land of Judah. Ours is a mighty city. He makes victory our inner and outer wall. Open the gates and let a righteous nation enter, a nation that keeps faith. The confident mind you guard in safety because it trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever and ever, for in Yah the Lord you have an everlasting rock.
So it seems like that's a song. It seems like this is the song that, people would sing. By Yomahu, and it says Hashir Hazeh, this song. So Be'eretz Yehuda, your Aslan, Yeshua, yeah. So again, it seems like a song. I mean, it says it's a song. It says it's a song. So
Sing it, Rabbi.
I don't know the lyrics, but this is part of this song. And again, the song's not over. Okay.
For he has brought low those who dwelt high up, has humbled the secure city, humbled it to the ground, leveled it with the dust, to be trampled underfoot by the feet of the needy, by the souls of the poor. The path is level for the righteous man. O just one, you make smooth the course of the righteous. For your just ways, O Lord, we look to you. We long for the name by which you are called. At night, I yearn for you with all my being. I seek you with all the spirit within me. For when your judgments are wrought on earth, the inhabitants of the world learn righteousness. But when the scoundrel is spared, he learns not righteousness. In a place of integrity, he does wrong. He ignores the majesty of the Lord.
And again, not really sure where the song ends, but the song does seem to kind of, I I think kind of ends here where I said it ends, but maybe not. I mean, this line could be part of it. This line could even be part of it, but it seems as though that it starts to sound more like Isaiah talking and giving prophecy rather than a song. This part seems to be like a song. Yeah, up till about in here or here. Or here. But again, this is the way Isaiah talks when he's giving prophecy. Okay.
At night I yearn for you with all my being. I seek you with all the spirit within me. For when your judgments are wrought on earth, the inhabitants of the world learn righteousness. But when we read that. But when the scoundrel is spared, he learns not righteousness. In a place of integrity, he does wrong. He ignores the majesty of the Lord.
And here definitely seems like, again, the prophecies, the words that Isaiah says.
O Lord, they see not your hand exalted. Let them be shamed as they behold your zeal for your people and fire consuming your adversaries. O Lord, may you appoint well-being for us, since you have also requited all our misdeeds. O Lord, our God, lords other than you possessed us, but only your name shall we utter.
Okay, well, these phrases that all begin Adonai, right? Lord, Adonai. That seems to be a part of the refrain. Oh, actually, in this line is part of the previous part. Lords other than you possessed us, which again is other gods, basically.
They are dead. They can never live. Shades. They can never rise. Of a truth, you have dealt with them and wiped them out, have put an end to all mention of them. When you added to the nation, O Lord, when you added to the nation, extending all the boundaries of the land, you were honored. O Lord, in their distress they sought you. Your chastisement reduced them to anguish, whispered prayers. Like a woman with child approaching childbirth, writhing and screaming in her pangs, so are we become because of you, O Lord. We were with child, we writhed. It is as though we had given birth to wind. We have won no victory on earth. The inhabitants of the world have not come to life. Oh, let your dead revive. Let corpses arise. Awake and shout for joy, you who dwell in the dust. For your dew is like the dew on fresh growth. You make the land of the shades come to life.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that none of these lines are actually used in our tefillot, in our prayers, in our poems, and our songs. We don't use a lot of these words, but again, they're part of Isaiah's imagery of the Jewish people returning to strength and coming back to life. Later parts of Isaiah are, and the later parts of Isaiah, even though we say they're written by a different author, they actually harken back to a lot of this imagery. When we get to like the 50s and 60s, the chapters in the 50s and 60s, again, even though we think it's written by a different person, it's not like they're that different, which is why people said, well, they were combined together by people who thought they sounded somewhat similar. They have a similar imagery. They use similar visuals. They talk about, ideas in a way that are similar enough that we can maybe group them together. There's a reason why the first and second Isaiahs were brought together. So just keep that in mind. It's not like the rest of Isaiah, you're going to go, oh, that sounds so different. I mean, you'll see the differences. There are certain phrases that are used in the second Isaiah that you don't see. There are certain things that seem to be said that give this away to people. Again, there were people who 1,000 years ago said, Isaiah does seem like it changes a little bit in the second half. And again, those kind of people said, well, we don't talk about it. So, yeah, especially references to King Cyrus, which would be really specific. If first Isaiah was talking about Cyrus in particular, you'd be like, whoa, he knew Cyrus's name. So it's those kind of things that like people said. I guess mainly because if Isaiah was a prophet who could actually pick out the name of the Persian king's name 200 years later, why did other prophets not do that? So it kind of begs the question, like, is it easier to assume that it's a different Isaiah, or should we just assume that Isaiah was a prophet that was able to say these names that no other prophet ever did? So, all right. So,
Mark,
yes.
I know you said that none of this, or not a lot of this at this point, is used in our liturgy or songs. And I know you've also said that Isaiah has the most haftarot.
Yeah.
Is it first and second, so to speak? Are they equal in haftarot, or?
Second Isaiah is the primary because of the last 7 weeks of the Jewish year. The month from Tisha, the month and a half from Tisha B'Av to Rosh Hashanah, we read the 7 weeks. We read second Isaiah the whole time. So that moves it up. First Isaiah is used a few times, but not anywhere near as much as the second Isaiah. It could be also because, listen, those messages of comfort are like they go in order, and people just say, "Hey, let's just read the last 7 weeks of Isaiah," but of that part of Isaiah. But maybe also people stylistically like the second Isaiah style better than they like this first Isaiah. I mean, I don't think that's the case. I think they just said, hey, this last section of Isaiah is perfect for us to have as a message of consolation. But yeah, that's why Isaiah is used so much more. Interestingly, though, there are words like we said, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, out of Zion will come forth, the word of God, the Torah. That is from first Isaiah. There's other parts of Isaiah that are real important for Christians that come from first Isaiah, like, the child will lead you, or, the young woman is with child. Those lines are obviously super important for Christians that come from first Isaiah. But you know what? Look, for songs, well, let's finish this and I'll show you. I'll show you one. Okay.
Go, my people, enter your chambers and lock your doors behind you. Hide but a little moment until the indignation passes. For lo, the Lord shall come forth from his place to punish the dwellers of the earth for their iniquity. And the earth shall disclose its bloodshed and shall no longer conceal its slain.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a great visual, right? It's a great visual of powerful visual of, God, taking back, and punishing those that are responsible. I just thought, since this was one of my favorite pieces of Isaiah that, look, this part of Isaiah is part of this part is almost at the end of Isaiah. And it's very similar to some of what, we read in first Isaiah, this part? Why are your clothes so wet? Your garments like he who treads grapes. I trod out the vintage alone of the peoples. No man was with me. I trod them in my anger, trampled them in my rage. Their lifeblood, they spattered my garments. All my clothing was stained.
Battle hymn of the Republic.
Exactly. That's the battle hymn of the Republic, folks. The Christians dug this part too. I mean, look, I don't know, like, who am I to judge who's a better writer? I'm not going to say first Isaiah is not as good a writer as second Isaiah, but people read it and were like, oh, that's a great line. I want to turn that into a song. Yeah, I mean, this is the grapes of wrath, or, this is however you're going to translate Isaiah 63. Yeah, it becomes a pretty powerful song. The Battle Hymn of the Republic was not written by Jews, was not written about Israel. It was written about going to war against people who were actually looked and sounded kind of like you. They were the people on the other side of the Mason-Dixon lines. So yeah, I mean, I think people really dug the words of Isaiah. First Isaiah has some really powerful and popular lines, but I don't know. I don't know what to tell you other than it's just not, we don't draw on much of the last. I'm always going to point out to you when we read 6 chapters of Isaiah, if we can go, and we just did, we read through 7 chapters of Isaiah, there was not one piece of text there that I would have said, you know, this text from prayers. That's not the case in other parts of Isaiah. It's almost impossible to go 7 chapters without getting, and I looked through it. I was like, is that really true? Because I looked through it this last week. I was like, well, what will people know from prayers or from culture from these chapters that we're reading right now? And there just weren't a lot. Anyways, but I will. Well, I just gave you the 63 one, but there's other ones. Don't worry. There's other ones when we get to the 60s where you'll see stuff. And again, as Judith pointed out, every Haftarah for the last 7 weeks of the Jewish year, from August until September, is Isaiah. It's all a second Isaiah. So if anyone has a Haftarah from there, if you had a bar bat mitzvah from August or end of July, middle end of July, depending on the year, what Tisha B'Av is, all the way through September, you read Isaiah as your Haftarah. It's pretty comprehensive. It means if you had a summer bar mitzvah, you probably read Isaiah. I didn't, by the way. I had a special Haftarah. I had a Haftarah Machar Chodesh, which was from Samuel, which was pretty cool too. It's a story of King David, or Prince David, almost being killed by King Saul. That's a kind of a cool story. But yeah, I mean, I would have had Isaiah. It was the main Haftarah if it hadn't been a Machar Chodesh. All right. That means the day after is Rosh Chodesh. All right. So here's chapter 27. Oh, yeah, here's one. Here is a reference. I forgot. We did get in chapter 27 this great reference.
In that day, the Lord will punish with his great, cruel, mighty sword, Leviathan, the elusive serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent. He will slay the dragon of the sea.
Yeah, let's look at that for a quick second, because Leviathan is always important to talk about Leviathan. He's called the Tanin, right? The dragon. So he's called a dragon here. What is Leviathan? Well, he's a sea serpent. That's clear. He lives in the water. He's a dragon of the sea, meaning he's pretty big. He's going to be destroyed by God. It seems as though God is going to destroy him with a sword. That's the word. God having a sword that he kills a serpent with is not something we talk a lot about in the Bible. Doesn't seem like a very popular biblical reference, right, folks? We don't usually think of God destroying serpents with a sword. It is in other cultures, right? We have this kind of imagery that people know from you might know this if you've ever been to England.
St. George and the dragon.
Yeah. So that's part of England. It's part of English mythology, right? St. George and the dragon. So kings killing dragons is a motif. It also, though, does exist here in Isaiah, which is the Leviathan, the sea serpent, is going to be destroyed by God. Why? Well, it's part of what God does to do away with scary things, right? Making the world safer is destroying the sea serpent. What does the sea serpent do? Well, causes floods, causes tsunamis, causes earthquakes, destroys ships out at sea. It scares people. And the Leviathan, according to Jewish mythology, and again, the Midrash, at the end of days, Leviathan will be killed by God, and everyone gets to eat Leviathan. Leviathan is the banquet food in heaven when God.
Leviathan is kosher.
Well, it's not clear Leviathan's kosher, Ronnie. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that the rabbis kind of imagine, that in the end of days, Leviathan will be eaten, and Leviathan wouldn't have been kosher, but we all get to eat a Leviathan because it's the end of days. There's also Behemoth, the great land animal, that is also one of the animals that gets slaughtered at the end of days, that allows for all the righteous to eat of, which again, it seems as though they're not kosher, but we get to eat non-kosher food at the end of days. Like those rules are not on the table anymore, according to the rabbis. So there is an understanding that Leviathan is our food. Maybe, but Leviathan is going to be much tastier. I'm not into seafood, but some people would say that eating this great serpent is, again, it is the reward for the righteous, right? The reward that we get to have Leviathan. Leviathan is.
But it could be a mammal.
Could be. It's a dragon. I mean, it's something big, right? It's something pretty scary. What is it based on? Well, people say that it's based on the fact that there were, giant squid, or there were giant whale type, whatever, Loch Ness monsters, whatever they were that people imagined were still part of, could be out there. And again, we do know that there were giant squid that were enormous and could take down a ship. But what is this based on? It's also based on ancient mythology of the area, where, again, the Phoenicians, the Babylonians, other people had these stories of God that destroyed an ancient sea serpent that created the earth out of the destruction of that ancient conflict between the waters and the sky. So is this what, look, people have had a problem with it for a long time. Christian scholars have a problem with it. They don't know what to make of it. People are uncomfortable with it because it seems as though, how does this fit into any kind of apocalyptic vision of like what is going to happen now? I don't know what to tell you other than it was a focal point in the Midrash that the Leviathan and the Behemoth would be foods for the righteous, that they built on this idea of that. Look, I will tell you that there is, this does go back to, by the way, I will say this. This goes back to the beginning. When God first created heaven and earth, the earth was unformed and void with darkness over the surface. You know this part, God sweeping over the water. Now, many people have said that what we actually see here is God creating the earth or the universe out of, again, either defeating the waters, but the waters were unformed, were chaos, and God essentially, this is a toned down version of God defeating the waters. God sweeping over the waters was God pacifying the waters. Why? Because in other cultures, you have Leviathan stories. You have Leviathan or sea dragon myths, which, of course, the Bible wasn't going to give us one of those, but it did give us a toned down version of God defeating the waters. We don't know. But we do know that Leviathan is still a word we use for really big things that are in the water. A big, really big ship, a really big submarine. And what is Leviathan today? Somebody tell me what Leviathan is today. Anybody? Oh, it's super important, my friends. Anybody?
Oh, I just can't remember.
No. Well, first of all, it was a book by Thomas Hobbes, but that's not what I was going to tell you. Leviathan, anybody? Nobody? All right. I'll show you. You may have heard of it when I show it to you. It'll jog a big memory for you.
Oh, it would show up just when we're trying to move away from it.
Yep.
Okay, so Israel is selling natural gas to Russia. Are they still doing that?
You can't hear him, can you?
He can't hear me, I don't think.
And I don't know that I can't hear him either.
Yeah,
I just sent him a text.
Thank-
so. Did you read my message?
Mm. I'll try that chat on Zoom.
Did you send it or you want me to?
I sent it.
Okay. Oh, we're getting a lesson in gas fields.
Yes. Yeah, I did hear about it, but I haven't heard about it lately.
Is the
Sorry,
rest of the
we already-
world?
you
Back.
guys got stuck on our computer. We can see,
we
I can
couldn't
see
hear
you on
you.
my computer, but we can't see you on the main computer. So we're going to get you guys back on. Sorry.
So when was this?
Sorry.
When was it?
Leviathan was all built up in the last 20 years. So the Leviathan gas fields and the Tamar gas fields will now be creating a situation where Israel is, as you can see, all this has all happened in the last 10 years that they've been able to actually bring out the natural gas from there.
Is Israel trying to get away from natural gas the same way, say, the United States is going to start being?
No, Israel is not trying to get, well, Israel is definitely developing solar as well. One of the agreements that it has with Jordan, right now is an exchange of water for solar. Jordan has some very large solar fields there because they're not doing much else, and they have a lot of desert too. But I mean, I'm saying that because Israel could develop its own solar. Israel does have some large solar fields, but solar plants, but Jordan has a lot, and Jordan needs to have a stable economy. So Israel has a agreement now that they're giving water to Jordan in exchange for solar power that's coming back over from Jordan. But you know, Israel is definitely looking for this gas, this natural gas, to be a good export. So it's less concerned.
Are they still selling it to the Russians?
I don't think so, actually. I don't think Russia's in on the
Because it said something about Gazprom on there.
No, yeah,
but I-
no, they did. And I just don't think that I don't think in the end that the Gazprom was necessary. So I don't think they ended up using Gazprom. So, or if they did, they used it for a very short period of time. But the conflict in Ukraine is actually very good for Israel, because all those countries that have cut the Russian natural gas can get it out of can now get it. Well, it's not exactly true. They can't get it out of Leviathan yet, but they're working on the ability to do that. So Russia knows that. Everybody knows that if Russia doesn't come to the longer this drags out, the more likely that all the natural gas Russia is still selling natural gas to Germany, to other places. Everyone knows that. But they just can't function without it. If Israel is able to start exporting this at the level that it needs to, it doesn't have the infrastructure yet to export it, but once it does, Russia becomes it makes the Russians almost completely irrelevant. So Russia knows that. And by the way, Russia could take that out on Israel if they want. By that, they could give Hezbollah the green light to start attacking the oil field, the gas field, and that could also be a source of war, which is why Israel has to give Hezbollah a cut of that. It's just otherwise they're going to destroy it. But people got mad at the last government of Israel, the government, the non-Netanyahu government. They got mad at them for signing a deal with Lebanon. They said that it was a sign of weakness. It wasn't. It was a calculated risk to take away the chance that Lebanon would attack those oil fields with Russian permission. Now, if Russia wants to attack those gas fields, they're going to have to do it themselves, which they could. I mean, I wouldn't put it past the Russians to do that, but yeah, that was why Israel had to give Hezbollah a cut of the. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. So let's finish up chapter 27.
In that day they shall sing of it, vineyard of delight. I, the Lord, keep watch over it. I water it every moment, that no harm may befall it. I watch it night and day. There is no anger in me. If one offers me thorns and thistles, I will march to battle against him and set all of them on fire. But if he holds fast to my refuge, he makes me his friend. He makes me his friend. In days to come, Jacob shall strike root, Israel shall sprout and blossom, and the face of the world shall be covered with fruit. Was he beaten as his beater had been? Did he suffer such slaughter as his slayers? Assailing them with fury unchained, his pitiless blast bore them off on a day of gale. Assuredly, by this alone shall Jacob's sin be purged away. This is the only price for removing his guilt, that he makes all the altar stones like shattered blocks of chalk, with no sacred post left standing, nor any incense altar.
Yeah, so things will be okay for the Jews, but they have to stop worshiping other gods. They have to stop worshiping God on other places besides Jerusalem. You can't do that anymore. God will forgive us, and God will bring us back, but you can't go back to those old ways.
Thus fortified cities lie desolate, homesteads deserted, forsaken like a wilderness. Their calves graze. There they lie down and consume its boughs. When its crown is withered, they break. Women come and make fires with them, for they are a people without understanding. That is why their maker will show them no mercy. Their creator will deny them grace. And in that day, the Lord will beat out the peoples like grain from the channel of the Euphrates to the Wadi of Egypt. And you shall be picked up one by one, O children of Israel. And in that day, a great ram's horn shall be sounded, and the strayed who are in the land of Assyria and the expelled who are in the land of Egypt shall come and worship the Lord on the holy mount in Jerusalem.
Yeah. And so again, these are prophecies that the Jewish people will come back home from all the places that they've been expelled to, from Assyria, from the land of Egypt. We actually read this portion at Rosh Hashanah. It's one of the portions that we read as part of the Shofar verses. So this one we actually do read, which is that the people will be brought together when you hear the sound of the shofar. So there will be a sound of the shofar when that happens, by Yom Hahu, on that day. So again, this is a part that we do read in on a holiday, but this is not the it's not the most famous parts of when we talk about Jews returning from other places. This isn't one that we refer to a lot, but it is connected to the sounds of the shofar. So that's where we're reading to today. Next week we're going to be continuing with still we're in the midst of first Isaiah. I looked at again part of what we're going to read next week is the story that we actually read from Kings, and we're going to read it in the Isaiah version, which is, you'll see, kind of a retelling of the story from Kings, from the book of Kings. And then after that, we'll probably have about 4 more weeks or so, total of like 5 weeks more of Isaiah. But in 2 weeks probably, we'll get into the second Isaiah, to the second part of Isaiah, chapter 40. So the last 26 chapters. So not next week, and next week we'll be in person, and the next week too we'll be in person. But yeah, as we're getting closer, now we're in the part where let's want to wish everybody happy Purim, but in a month we're going to be reading. We'll be in Pesach, and so the full moon, the full moon that we were underneath as we celebrate Purim, the next full moon will be under Passover. Look, this year in particular, we got to feel some seasons, right?
Yeah.
I don't always say that. No, Ronnie, we had snow. We had hail. We had everything. We had snow, man. People made snowmen.
Ronnie, what's the difference between a flurry and snow?
That's 6.
Yeah, exactly, we had flurry.
So we had, I had snow on my car. Anyways, the seasons definitely though feel like they're upon us this year. Sometimes they don't, and I actually feel bad because sometimes I don't feel like we're, like we don't get it. I 1 year I really do want to just feel the holidays as seasonal occurrences and not just. I know I lived in New York. It's not like I haven't, but it really is interesting because maybe again as I start to think about it as I get older, you think about the year, what's going to happen over a year. Look, for me, my job rotates around, it's Purim time, it's Passover, it's whatever. So I do think about those times, but to think about them on the natural cycle, to really step out and say, let's feel this time, let's actually feel this this season. And we can do that right now. I mean, we can literally feel right now and look around and we don't always get that. So I just encourage everybody to go out, look at the mountains, look how beautiful the mountains are right now. Doesn't always happen. And so I've lived here long enough to know this doesn't always happen. So I don't know. Maybe I'll get another year, God willing, we never know, you know, but this year I'm trying to enjoy the year as it's
But it's time.
unfolding.
I like being.
Yeah, but it's part of the cycle of life.
Time for spring.
So, all right, everybody. Well, happy Purim and try to,
Everyone.
thank you, Rosemary, and
Thank
thanks
you, Mark.
for everybody for being here today. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Tell you
Everybody.
myself without my